Here's imagery of Region 2, EOC Region 2 of Florida, and this is an example of imagery that I processed, and it'll show what you can do to make a big difference in the quality of imagery. You can't tell much zoomed out here, but here's the 13 counties of Region 2, and right now this is the I'm showing the original imagery from the Florida Department of Revenue, and it's a layer from ArcGIS Online. And from a distance here, okay, well that doesn't look bad. Let's zoom in a bit. So I'm going to zoom in, and so when you zoom in, things don't look quite as maybe quite as appealing. And the closer you zoom in, we'll see the more problematic things are. You can see different counties. Obviously, the imagery is a bit different, and the colors don't match up very well at all. And so what I did, I took the imagery and I processed each county, and I adjusted the histograms so the colors match, and I made it so the imagery is clearer. And I'll show you my version of the same imagery. So this is my version of the same imagery, and you can see it matches a lot better, and we'll go to a few more areas here. And this is a very telling area. So this is the original imagery, and this is the same imagery that I processed. And you can see the colors are more natural, and you might be able to tell it looks sharper, and the imagery blends in together nicely from one county to the next. And let's zoom out a little bit more. So here's Wakulla County, Liberty County, and Franklin County all together, and you can see the imagery doesn't blend together very well, and some of it looks hazy, and some of the colors just really look odd, as a matter of fact. So, well, what on earth could I do with this? Well, here's what I came up with. It's quite a bit nicer, I think. Another example of that. Here's one of my favorites. So here's Wakulla County, Franklin County, and you can see where one county's imagery ends and the other begins. It's pretty obvious. You know, they don't blend in together at all. And this is my version of it that I processed. So how about that? Let's zoom in on this bridge. So here's the bridge in my version, and here's the bridge in the original version. I did a combination of pre-processing the images in Photoshop, adjusting the histograms so the making the images clearer, and adjusting the colors so that they matched better and were more natural. And then in the mosaic data set, making a good use of seam lines so that the imagery for each county would blend in together rather well, as you see, like this, as opposed to this. And let's go to another bookmark. Here's a rather telling area. So that's Madison County, and that's imagery from Jefferson County. And obviously the imagery is quite different well, what on earth could one do with that? Well, how about this? See, it blends in together quite well. Well, why don't I zoom out a bit so you can see there's no real trickery involved. So that's the original imagery that you could get right from ArcGIS online, and this is the same imagery. I took the original files and I processed them and came up with this. So it's much nicer, and yes, you can still tell a difference between the counties. The imagery is different after all, and I'm sure taken with different types of cameras and things like that, but still it's a much nicer transition from one county to the other. And so you have something like that rather than that. So there's definitely things you can do, and this is and you probably also noticed that the imagery overall is clearer. I'll show you just a couple more bookmarks. So here's a close-up of a farm, and this is the original imagery, and this is the imagery as I had processed it, and you can see the colors are more natural and the imagery is sharper. And let's go to St. Mark's. You can see the imagery is kind of hazy, and my version, I got rid of the haziness, and it's a little sharper in addition to that, and the colors are more natural. So there's a lot of improvement there. And maybe one more bookmark. Downtown Monticello. Here it looks rather hazy. Here again, I got rid of the haziness and the imagery is sharper also. And let's zoom out a bit. So why settle for this when you can have this? And much sharper. You can even tell zoomed out. Let's see. But you can tell the colors are much more natural in my version. So there's a bit of processing you have to do, obviously, to get results like this. And speaking of results, let's just do a flyover of the counties. Look at it that way, and you'll notice Leon County is missing, and that's because it's not part of the mosaic. It's treated separately, although we could have included it in the mosaic, we just didn't. But why don't we just zoom in and go from county to county. So let's just start over here. Franklin and Liberty County. And you can see that draws pretty nicely. And I'll try not to contrast that with the original imagery too much. I think we did enough of that. So I'll just have it on the imagery as I processed it, and maybe zoom in here and there. And yeah, you see railroad tracks and some houses. Let's zoom back out. And you can see things blend together pretty well. Zoom in here a bit. It's where Liberty, Wakulla, and Franklin County all come together. And let's see if we see some buildings. I could turn on the seam lines, although that kind of gives things away a bit. And the seam lines are a very important feature in any mosaic data set, especially one that blends imagery together. So those blue lines, those are the seam lines. And I encourage you to use seam lines where appropriate. If you haven't, in some circumstances, it's very useful in a mosaic data set. I've seen some people post their imagery online, for example, and they've not used seam lines at all when all they needed to do was use seam lines, and it would have really improved the results by quite a bit, and they just didn't do it for whatever reason. I'll just turn the seam lines off there. And that's a good tool when you make a mosaic data set. You can make seam lines, and that's very important for blending images together where they overlap, and get great results there. And again, I'm quite pleased with how the colors came out as opposed to how things looked in the original imagery. The coastline there, my processed imagery. Let's look at the original imagery. Okay, enough of that. So that turned out pretty well. You can see the seam line really from one county to another, right about here. You can see here where they blended together, and that's thanks to the seam line in the mosaic data set, and also my processing of the imagery, so it was kind of close together for to start with. That helped it too. And let's go a little bit more. So then let's move a little bit more east. And so here's Jefferson County and Madison County, and the imagery as I processed it, and okay, so this was the original imagery, and this is what I processed. I think this turned out pretty nice. Zoom out some more. There's quite a lot you can accomplish just adjusting the imagery in Photoshop and then making good use of the features you have available in a mosaic data set. Zoom in. zoom out a bit more to Hamilton County. Here we go. Zoom out a bit more. I think overall things worked out very good, and especially as you zoom in, I think things look better, because really that's how you'll really use the imagery to its greatest effect. So that's a flyover from all those counties in the EOC region 2.